We will call to order this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for May the 20th. We begin, as always, with the approval of adoption of the agenda. If anyone has any changes or modifications to the agenda, I'd like to hear them. If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
Have we a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries unanimously. We have minutes from the April 22nd meeting to review at this point. Does anyone have any changes or modifications to the minutes? If not, would someone have a motion to approve the minutes for that meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from April 22nd, 2019.
Have I a second?
Second.
Ooh. And all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. That motion is also unanimous. I believe we have two cases on the agenda for this evening. We begin with our first case. Kind of silly to begin with the second. So we'll begin with the first, and that is 18 REZ 26. Ms. Gruber, good evening.
Good evening. So this is a town-initiated rezoning for approximately 0.41 acres in downtown Cary. The subject site includes property at 327 South Academy Street and 105, 109, and 113 Walnut Street, or portions of property there. The existing zoning for the subject property is a small bit of town center office institutional and conditional use and town center medium density residential. Permitted uses in TC MDR include a variety of housing types up to 8 units per acre. The downtown park takes up the predominant part of the block, and a park is a permitted use in virtually every zoning district. The zoning is proposed to be changed to Town Center High Intensity Mixed Use, or TCHMXD. Some allowed uses in HMXD include commercial uses like retail sales and service, food and beverage service, office uses, and a variety of housing types up to 50 units per acre. So why are we just rezoning this portion of property? The subject property is outside of the park's master plan area, and this rezoning request will facilitate future development opportunities adjacent to the park. The Imagine Cary Community Plan sets the course for a desired future. Downtown Cary is a special planning area and is a focus area for our community. Two key policies in the downtown special planning area, or SPA, are encouraging downtown reinvestment and redevelopment and supporting a range of uses in downtown. Downtown is a walkable area, including an existing and growing network of sidewalk connectors, greenway trails, and of course, the downtown park. The streets surrounding the downtown park are 2 or 3 lane thoroughfares, except for Park Street, which is a collector street. Both Go Cary and Go Triangle have routes in the area. Our practice of notifying property owners within 800 feet of a rezoning request exceeds both Cary's land development ordinance requirement and the state's requirement of notifying adjacent parcels. This site was posted on April 5th for the Town Council public hearing we held in April. 3 citizens joined us at the neighborhood meeting on March 27th. Questions were asked about building height, future residential development, and potential partnerships with the developer. There were no speakers, and council had no questions at the council public hearing. And also, staff has received no phone calls or emails about this case. So our staff's preliminary analysis is that this request is consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan. The Downtown Special Planning Area, or SPA, is the vision for the area. And some key items from that include facilitating development opportunities adjacent to the downtown park that is described in the South Academy subdistrict in the downtown SPA. And also supporting economic growth and vitality is important in downtown Cary. So some questions for the board to consider this evening. Is this use appropriate at this location? Is the density change appropriate? Are the transitions appropriate? And probably most importantly, does this proposal meet the intent of the policies and vision defined in the downtown SPA? So that concludes staff's presentation, and I'm certainly available for your questions.
Thank you very much. And this is town initiated, so we don't really have an applicant to come speak with us. So It's now to us. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Gruber?
Let me ask, I think I understand, this site immediately adjoins the property where the parking deck is, behind the new library?
Yes, on the slide in front of you, the image on the right side, the site that's outlined in the kind of medium to navy blue shade, the text on the slide is a little light, but the rectangle immediately below that is the parking deck.
Okay, so this could possibly be developed in conjunction with the parking deck?
It's meant to be developed immediately adjacent to the parking deck or wrapping the parking deck.
Okay.
Any other questions on this side? How about on this side of the room? Any questions at all? Could there be a motion in the air?
I can make a motion. I move that the board find case number 18 REZ 26 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion beyond that?
To me, this is totally consistent with the development that's already underway downtown, and I think it easily meets the requirements of the special downtown district.
Okay, Chuck, anything else?
No.
All right, would all those in favor of this rezoning application please say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed say no. That motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. One down, one to go. I believe that would be next, 18 REZ 22. Mr. Wilson, good evening.
Good evening. This case is a request to rezone 1.98 acres located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Green Level West Road and Branton Drive from its existing residential 12 and residential 40 zoning districts to office and institutional conditional use. I do want to mention that it was brought to our attention this afternoon that 2 of the attachments to your staff report were incorrect. We've corrected these links since becoming aware of this late this afternoon. And I'd also like to note that these attachments are graphics that were correctly included in the body of the staff report before you this evening. The site is located on Green Level West Road, approximately 1/3 of a mile west of NC Highway 55 and about 1/2 mile from NC 540. The site adjoins 3 residential neighborhoods: White Oak Estates to the north, Lansdowne to the east, and Ashley Woods to the south on the other side of Green Level West Road. Ms. Susan Beavers owns the parcel due west of the site. The site does not appear to be impacted by stream buffers, although a field determination would be made at the time of development plan review. The Cary Community Plan's Move chapter designates Green Level West Road as a 4-lane thoroughfare with a landscape median, and it's already built to its ultimate cross-section. This photo shows the current conditions of Green Level West Road near the Branton Drive intersection. In April of 2018, the town finished a project that widened Green Level West Road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes and added a dedicated left turn lane onto Branton Drive from eastbound Green Level West Road. This is a view of the property from Google Earth, which is why you see what appear to be yellow lines on the asphalt. The picture is taken from a point just west of the Branton Drive Green Level West intersection. And this is a view of Branton Drive from Green Level West. You can see the crosswalk across Branton that was installed as part of the Green Level West widening project. The site is on the right. You can actually see it's posted for the council public hearing in this photo. Branton Drive serves as the only point of ingress and egress for the White Oak Estates neighborhood. The site is not currently served by a regular fixed transit service. Go Cary Route 4 is the nearest fixed transit route. The nearest Go Cary and Go Triangle stops are about 1/3 of the mile east of the site, near the intersection of Green Level West Road and NC 55. The subject property does not contain and is not immediately adjacent to any parks or greenways. There is an existing street side trail along the northbound lane of NC 55. The proposed area to be rezoned is currently zoned a combination of residential 12 and residential 40. The larger portion was zoned R12 in 1991 as part of what became the Lansdowne neighborhood. The applicant proposes to rezone this site to office and institutional conditional use with certain zoning conditions that would apply. The applicant's proposed conditions limit the permissible uses for the site. You have before you a list of key uses that are allowed in the O&I district by right or with a special use permit. From among the permitted uses, the applicant proposes to only allow office uses for business or professional purposes. There is another condition that specifically prohibits healthcare office uses. Other proposed zoning conditions include a 15,000 square foot building size limit, a 35-foot building height limit, conditions prohibiting dumpsters and loading docks, and architectural conditions that limit some roof types and colors. Since the town public hearing, the applicants offered new conditions. A wooden privacy fence is proposed within 3 to 10 feet of the northern and eastern property lines. A 70-foot building setback is proposed along the northern and eastern property lines, which is 20 feet or 40% larger than required. Evergreen buffer material shall be a minimum of 10 feet tall at installation, which is 2 feet or 25% larger than required. And if an emergency generator is installed on the site, it shall be shielded from the neighbors by a masonry wall. Staff performed a preliminary analysis of this case regarding conformance with policies from the Imagine Cary Community Plan. We note that the site is located on a 4-lane thoroughfare and is also adjacent to a destination center, which is an area designated for intense future development. Based on these attributes, we believe there are 3 policies from the work chapter that are applicable, as an office building at this site could provide an opportunity to retain and grow an existing Cary business, could attract and nurture a small business, and could support the locational need of a new and/or expanding firm. We also believe that a policy in the shape chapter of the plan that calls for appropriate transitions between different types and intensities of land uses is applicable. The plan further discusses that there are 3 different types of transitions related to this policy: land use, architectural, and buffer. The goal of the plan is to provide for harmonious transitions between different uses. We're going to take a deep dive into each of these 3 types of transitions. For guidance regarding the land use transition, we look to the adopted Future Growth Framework Map in Chapter 6. The site's located at the edge of the traditional neighborhood designation on the Future Growth Framework Map. Single-family detached houses are generally the predominant land use in such areas. However, the traditional neighborhood designation does allow for, quote, a limited amount of non-residential uses, end quote. These limited non-residential uses are identified as incidental uses, and the plan talks about how they can occur in the form of neighborhood businesses or small format commercial businesses. Let's take a closer look at these 2 types of incidental uses. Neighborhood businesses are defined in the Cary Community Plan as small format businesses designed for use by retail, service, or office uses to serve adjacent neighborhoods, including corner gas stations, convenience stores, neighborhood banks, and other small format stores that fit into the neighborhood fabric. This category appears to have some relevance to this proposal, although the proposed zoning condition to limit the building to 15,000 square feet does potentially approach the upper size limit of such uses. Small format commercial businesses must also fit into a commercial or corridor context, according to the Cary Community Plan. Given the distance between this site and the larger commercial center at Green Level West and NC 55, it appears to be a stretch to consider this relationship and category to be applicable in this situation. Back to the Growth Framework Map. The Cary Community Plan also states that for sites located on the boundaries between development categories on the Future Growth Framework Map, the mapped edges of a particular development category are not intended to be strictly interpreted. They may be interpreted in light of the policies relevant to the site and the particular site circumstances. This point leads us to note again that the site's also adjacent to a destination center. The case can certainly be made that this site functions as part of the transition between the neighborhoods and the more intense destination center. On the other hand, given that this center is yet to develop, it could also be viewed as premature to use this proximity as justification in this case. Finally, we note that the proposed prohibitions on dumpsters and loading docks, as well as the proposed shielding if a generator is needed, would limit the noises frequently associated with a business and ease the transition from office to residential. The architectural aspect of appropriate transitions is intended to create a cohesive connection and match neighborhood character through building materials and architectural elements. The proposed architectural conditions are very limited, though, and do not appear to guarantee that the architecture associated with development on this site will be harmonious with the surrounding residential uses. For example, one of the proposed conditions concerns roof types. The applicant proposes to prohibit flat roofs and limit shed roofs to 1/3 of the total roof area. While flat roofs are not residential in nature, and it's appropriate that they've been prohibited, there are other roof types that are still allowed. For example, in addition to shed roofs, butterfly roofs are also still allowed. Neither of these roof types are found on any of the nearby structures, nor are they generally residential in nature. Should either of these roof types be utilized, the ability of the building to fit into the neighborhood fabric would be significantly diminished. Finally, the proposed conditions do not address the building's materials or architectural elements, and thus do not provide any certainty that these features would be harmonious with the adjacent neighborhoods. The buffer aspect of appropriate transitions is intended to provide appropriate separation and buffering to mitigate negative impacts that non-residential development might have on adjacent residential. We do have the normal requirements of the LDO applying here along the northern and the eastern boundaries where a Type A buffer would be required. Type A buffer offers the town's highest level of screening and requires the utilization of a significant number of mid-story evergreen trees. The applicant has addressed separation by proposing a condition to increase the setback along the northern and eastern boundaries. In normal cases, the building would need to be set back by the width of the 40-foot buffer, plus an additional 10-foot setback to protect root zones. In other words, a cumulative 50-foot setback. The applicant is proposing to provide a 70-foot setback, a 40% increase. The applicant has also proposed to address buffering by installing mid-story evergreen trees that are a minimum of 10 feet tall, 25% above the normally applicable 8-foot requirement. The applicant conducted the required neighborhood meeting on September 5th with 20 neighbors in attendance. Residents expressed concerns about traffic, side entry from Branton Drive, garbage pickup, backup generator noise, and light impacts. The applicant then held a second neighborhood meeting on October 3rd to continue the discussion with the neighbors and develop new zoning conditions to address their concerns. 16 neighbors attended this meeting. As a result of the second neighborhood meeting, the applicant added new zoning conditions, including architectural conditions and prohibitions on dumpsters and loading docks. The applicant also met with council members, after which 2 more conditions were added. In addition, both the applicant and neighbors had met with staff on different occasions to discuss the case. The town council public hearing was held on January 10th. A total of 14 citizens spoke at the hearing. Concerns shared included topics such as the size and architectural appearance of the building, various traffic-related concerns, potential generator noise, light and stormwater impacts, and whether or not this was spot zoning. Following the hearing, staff continued to receive emails and phone calls from 3 neighbors, and even had meetings with 2 of them to further discuss the proposal and their concerns. Following the hearing, it's our understanding that the applicant also held additional meetings with some of the neighbors. These meetings led to the applicant proposing the 4 additional conditions that we discussed previously regarding privacy, separation, buffering, and screening if an emergency generator is installed. As discussed earlier, staff's preliminary analysis finds that the primary applicable policies in this case come from the work and shape chapters of the Imagined Cary Community Plan. In the work chapter, the proposal does appear to have the potential to retain and grow existing businesses, attract and nurture small businesses, and support locational needs for new or expanding firms. In fairness, though, you could make these statements about sites on the edge of land use areas all over town and they would be applicable. Which brings me to the point that all of these policies are not equal in weight, and it is the guidance that the shape chapter offers regarding appropriate transitions between uses that emerges to staff as the most important applicable policy in this case. So I'm going to take the time to walk through each of these 3 types of transitions. Regarding the land use transition, the site is within the traditional neighborhood of the Future Growth Framework map and is adjacent to land that is within a future destination center. The traditional neighborhood category lists neighborhood business as an incidental land use that may be appropriate at the edge of particular development category if the proposal fits into the neighborhood fabric. While the zoning conditions prohibit dumpsters and loading docks will limit noise and aesthetic issues associated with a business and ease the transition from office to residential, the maximum allowed size and associated intensity of the business pushes the limits of what one would expect of an incidental use at the edge of a traditional neighborhood. Also, given the fact that the adjacent destination center is currently undeveloped, while the 3 adjacent neighborhoods are fully developed, the case can be made that this use is premature. Accordingly, staff believes that the use falls short of fitting into the current neighborhood fabric and does not provide an appropriate land use transition at this time. From an architectural perspective, the proposal prohibits one roof type, limits another, and provides limitations regarding roof color. No conditions are offered regarding building materials or architectural elements. Accordingly, staff believes that the proposal does not provide certainty that an appropriate and harmonious architectural transition will be achieved with the adjacent residential uses. The applicant has proposed increased separation in the form of a privacy fence along the northern and eastern property lines, along with a 40% larger setback for the building. A condition has also been offered to increase buffer separation in the form of the initial evergreen planting material being 25% larger than required. Staff believes that these conditions do satisfy the buffer transition component and provide an appropriate transition for this attribute. After reviewing and evaluating each of these applicable policies in the Imagine Cary Community Plan, staff's preliminary assessment is that on balance, the proposal falls short of making a complete and convincing case that it achieves appropriate use and architectural transitions, and thus our preliminary assessment is that the proposal is not consistent with the Imagine Cary Community Plan. We believe that an important topic for the board to consider as part of its deliberations would include whether or not the proposed use and its unique collection of conditions meets each of the three attributes of an appropriate transition between a non-residential use and a residential use. This concludes the staff's presentation. At this time, the applicant will provide comments to the board.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Board. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group here on behalf of the applicant. Here with me tonight are Pat and Donna Cassidy, the owners of Net 32. They are essentially the applicants in this case. And also here with me tonight is Charlie Yoakley of McAdams Company, who provided land planning and land planning and engineering associated with this plan. Not here with me tonight are representatives of Gensler, who are the architects that Pat and Don are working with. Before I jump into the case, a couple of preliminary comments. Just the why. Why did Pat and Donna seek this site out? Net 32 is an existing business that they own and operate. They actually founded it about 20 years ago, and it's grown here in the town of Cary. It's primarily located near the intersection of Waldo Rood and Cary Parkway, kind of just behind the Cookout. In those little office buildings over there. They're currently located in 3 different locations comprising approximately 10,000 square feet. One of the things that is really exciting to them about this opportunity is it would provide them a place for all of their employees to work in one location. Having their employees in 3 different locations is less than ideal. As a business owner myself, certainly from an overhead standpoint, that's less than ideal. But also from providing for the type of work environment that they want to provide for their employees, you just don't want to be spread out unnecessarily in 3 locations. And so being able to develop a 15,000 square foot office building on this site would allow them to not only house their existing needs, but also contemplates future growth, which is what they've been doing very, very successfully. Just for your edification, and I've got a letter that Pat Cassidy prepared that I'm going to send up, and you don't need to read it now, but it kind of touches a little bit on the why they're interested in this site and why they're so passionate about this particular opportunity. They raised their family within a year of this site. I mean, they're Cary residents. They really enjoy being in Cary. They want to keep their business in Cary, and so the retaining and the retaining the work policies that are included in the Cary Community Plan that Rob touched on are certainly near and dear to their heart and certainly apply in an instance like this. So I'm going to hand this letter up. I'm going to try to highlight what we believe three major components of this case are, and I don't want to repeat anything that Rob said, especially considering time is sensitive. But there are essentially what we believe 3 important points that I would hope that the Planning and Zoning Board would take away from this. One is we believe this case strikes the right balance. It strikes the right balance between what's currently on the ground and what the town sees developing over the course of the next 25 to 30 years in this area. 2, it's appropriately conditioned to provide for the types of transitions that will ensure an office use of this nature in this location won't be a burden on the surrounding areas. And 3, that office and residential can coexist. And I know that that seems obvious But, this is a case that has gone through a lot of work with the neighbors. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the neighbors in multiple meetings. And I think the conditions that are in front of you, what I consider a very robust set of conditions associated with a 15,000 square foot office building, they're a reflection of the significant work that have been put in to make sure that this particular office use can coexist in this, with its residential neighbors. First, with respect to striking the balance, and I think this slide tells the big picture story. This is located in a traditional neighborhood. It's not quite 2 acres in size, so it's not a real big parcel. It fronts on Green Level West. Green Level West is a major thoroughfare. It's a 4-lane median divided road. You saw the slide. The manner in which it's built out, it currently carries a lot of traffic. It will carry more traffic as sites in this area redevelop and develop, the undeveloped portions develop in the destination center. There is residential to the east of the site, and we've got conditions that we believe make it a good fit with those folks, and I'll talk about those in a minute. We've got residential across the street. Again, it's a 4-lane median divided highway, but there is residential across the street, and we're cognizant of that. There's residential to the north, large lot residential. That might not be consistent with what the town sees as the long-term vision for development of that area. And then finally to the west is the destination center. As you all are aware, there's only 5 of those in the entire town. And so it's supremely important that, once you develop in a destination center, you can't get it back. And so we believe it's important for us. We believe it's important for the town to be especially cognizant of how the fringes of destination centers develop, because what you do on the outside will have an impact as you work your way towards the middle of the destination center. And so we believe that the conditions that have been offered strike the right balance in that regard. Those conditions, as Rob talked about, provide for an office building that's 35 feet in height. It's not 50 feet, it's not 75 feet, it's not overarching, it's actually consistent with the adjacent residential areas from a height standpoint. The building itself, while being up to 15,000 square feet potentially, would probably be delivered in a 2-story fashion. It's a small site, and with the buffers and the setbacks that are being provided, it's tough to park a 1-story, 15,000 square foot space on less than 2 acres. And so, in the conditions that have been offered, again, a 70-foot building setback is substantial from the north and the east, especially, again, if you look at the configuration of the site, you really start to eat away at a lot of developable area on that site for office purposes. I want to walk through a couple of examples that talk about how we believe this fits in with the area. And so this is North Hills, which you all are probably familiar with. That is Raleigh's version of a destination center. There's no debating that. And I brought this example because it's an extreme example, but I actually I worked for 5 years in an office building that faced this way, and so I actually got to look out on the stark contrast between the 5-story residential buildings that were developed at North Hills, and immediately across the street there is single-family residential. And actually, that home right there was recently, built and acquired at, I think, $1.1 million. And the reason I mention that is that this is how Raleigh handled transitions. Maybe not how Cary would handle the transition, but this is how Raleigh handled the transition from the North Hills Destination Center to the existing residential community. And again, it's a large scale, it's a large existing built residential community, and it works. It works. Again, maybe not what Cary would do and maybe what the Cary Community Plan contemplates, but that's what North Hills has done. I want to talk about some examples here in town where you've got existing non-residential adjacent to residential, and they coexist. They fit. This site before you is I believe it's an 11,000 square foot office building at Cary Parkway near its intersection with High House. It is 10,795 square feet. It's got just a 30-foot building setback. It's got just a 30-foot type A buffer. And just for your edification, this building is the 11,000 square foot building. This is another non-residential use. This is an office use, and just off the screen to your north is this site, which is built, and it's a 33,000 square foot office building, 3 stories in height, for a total of 44 feet in height. And I mention that because of import. This entire area, everything you see on this slide, is designated traditional neighborhood. much like the area that we're developing. The offices are located in traditional neighborhood. The residences are located in traditional neighborhood. And it works. I mean, and so as we look at the scale and the bulk and the use transition, there's no problem with transitions in this example. These are sites that front on Cary Parkway. Our site fronts on Green Level West. It's got residential adjacent to it. There's a lot of comparisons you can draw between this particular location and our site. You've got other examples. This is what it looks like. You've got other examples. This is Weston, obviously an extreme example, but this is a several-story building. It's a 3-story building that's actually 50 feet in height, adjacent to residential. They've only provided for a 20-foot buffer in that location, although you've got some existing wooded areas that provide for some natural breaks. And again, so that's the site plan associated with that. This is actually a daycare. It is adjacent to Net 32. Net 32's offices are 2 of them are in those buildings there. Let me grab that. That's a 14,415 square foot daycare that provides a 30-foot type A buffer along its western boundary, a 70 feet total of setback from the building to the adjacent residential areas, and again, it works. And so these are just some examples of how you can have residential uses adjacent to non-residential uses. All of these examples that I gave you are sites that were zoned for that purpose and that don't have the robust set of conditions that we've included in this case. And so we believe that our example actually provides greater surety that the uses will be able to coexist. And I'm running out of time, but finally, I want to talk a little bit about Preston Development Company. This is at the front of Weston Estates, brand new office building. This is a 12,000 square foot office building, directly across the street from some very nice residential. And so with that, we believe this is the right fit in the right location and are happy to answer as many questions as you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start off to my right for questions for the staff or for the applicant.
Sure. I have questions for staff. Good evening. Let me get to a slide I want to look at. A couple of questions. The parcel in the applicant that we're talking about tonight, was that ever originally part of the White Oak Estates? You mentioned that part of the larger of the 2 sites that are being combined is part of the Lansdowne, but I'm just kind of thinking, I'm just curious about the history of that site. Has it just been an orphan site that's been there, or was never incorporated into White Oak or Lansdowne?
I believe the history, and the applicant can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this triangle, which is zoned R40, was part of the Beavers track on the west side of the road. And I'm not sure the history as to the road dividing the Beavers track, but it's an isolated remnant, which is proposed to be married with the R12 piece that was zoned R12 as part of the Lansdowne subdivision development.
Okay, that was back in 1991 that was zoned in with Lansdowne.
Yes.
Is Branton Road a town road? Or is it a private road, just out of curiosity?
The towns, let's see if I have a map here that shows this. I don't believe I have a map that actually shows the corporate limits in the presentation. My recollection is that 1 or 2 of the lots here on Branton have been annexed. I believe that the road is still a state road.
State road, okay.
I believe it's maintained by NCDOT. I don't believe that the road right-of-way has been annexed in front of those 2 lots.
Okay, but it's not a private road, so it's been adopted by the state.
Correct.
Okay.
As far as we know, it's been adopted by the state. Yes, we have. I've received confirmation it is a state road.
The state road, okay, thank you.
Katie?
Another question I have is regarding, I guess, there's been a lot of discussion, so I appreciate that the applicant has really worked very hard to listen to the neighbors, talking with staff, trying to find, that balance of from their business case as well as understanding the needs. And as staff pointed out, they've done an exceptional job in terms of buffers, setbacks, to particularly to accommodate the neighbors to the north and the south. But maybe you could help me a little bit about, was there a discussion about architectural design beyond limiting flat roofs? I think, Mr. Barron, you mentioned that their architect is Gensler, which is that correct? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So they're working with, a Class A architectural firm. And I'm just wondering if there was conversations or if there's still an opportunity to have further conversations about architectural standards, whether it be about, if not a flat roof, as was shown by Mr. Barron, we saw lots of hip roofs and things like that. So I can envision that, brick, whatever, to kind of check that box. I mean, as I think about it, staff said, it didn't check 2 out of 3 in the staff's position consideration, but what it would take to check that one. Were there conversations? I mean, just out of curiosity in the process. And
the topic of potentially providing additional architectural elements as conditions is something that has come up. But as the board knows, conditions have to be voluntarily proposed by the applicant. No conditions have been proposed at this time, and nor is it the staff's prerogative to, dictate or require such. So there certainly is additional time that if the applicant wishes to propose additional conditions in this area, that they could.
okay, one last question I have. I appreciate that. I appreciate that, particularly recognition there's still some time to address that. Because we're the applicant, often as we have zoning, we don't talk about what's going to go there, but in this case, it's an existing business, and so it's been identified that net 32. Is this mainly going to be like a sales office location, or I'm curious is in terms of an online distributor or distribution entity for certain goods and products? Is there warehousing? Because I'm kind of curious about. All of a sudden, there's no dumpster, so is it just strictly going to be used for office versus fulfillment, I guess is what I'm asking.
So, as you have noted, there's a condition that limits the use to office, business or professional. That's the only condition we have. We don't have a condition that specifically addresses who the tenant may be. However, I'm sure the applicant would be glad to respond to the other part of the questions that you've asked.
Okay. So just back to that, and we'll let Mr. Barron.
Sure.
So with office, it is strictly that. It is office. It's not a mixed use. So if it was a mixed use, I'm thinking of a building I used to work in that was part office and part operations center, but that would not fall. This would be strictly office. It would be.
Well, I guess we'd have to better understand what you mean by operations center. If there's people sitting at a desk talking on the phone, that might fall under the
That'd be
office category.
I'm thinking about pallet racks and shipping and UPS trucks coming every day. Okay. For shipping, not necessarily for delivery. But
yeah,
okay.
the prohibition against loading docks should speak pretty clearly in that regard.
And I appreciate you reminding me of that condition.
Sure.
Did you have anything else?
Want to respond to?
That's less of my questions.
I don't know if this is on.
Yeah, it is.
Great. So from an operations standpoint, it is their business operation that will be conducted there. They don't do any actual distribution. They actually facilitate putting, getting people in touch with the place where you get the right piece of equipment. And so they're actually not, if you go to their current operation, there aren't any shipments leaving the building because they've got folks behind computers who are working to make sure that doctors are getting in touch with what they need, or dental operations are getting in touch with what they need. So they're kind of middlemen, for the best way to put it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the clarification. I don't have any other questions.
Great. Steve?
Just a couple of questions. For to get onto the property, would you come in, would there be entry from the side or from Green Level West? How would you access the office building?
At this time, that's more of a development review question, but peering ahead, we would anticipate that access more than likely will come from Branton Drive. We believe that was the applicant acquisition of that remnant triangle to have greater frontage on Branton Drive aligns with that. We think it's very unlikely that NCDOT would grant a curb cut off of Green Level West Road that close to the intersection.
So that was my other thing I was confused on. Do they have that triangle now or no? There was one map that had a little cutout. What was that? That was the only thing I was confused about.
Bounce back to
The triangle is part of the zoning case.
There's actually
That little brown triangle was part.
So that's part of it. Okay,
Application.
I just wanted to make sure of that,
two parcels being made into one.
because it's both and you
Right.
already have both parcels. This is not a separate,
You have both parcels under your
We have
control.
both, yeah, we have both parcels under control, yeah.
okay. And then could you look at the growth framework map that you showed earlier? I can't remember what number it is. Yeah, there you go. So right now for the destination center, that is all future.
That's correct. They're,
And
it's
that.
not developed at this
A
time.
destination center by definition can really be heavy commercial, hotels, restaurants, gas stations, all that kind of stuff, right?
This destination center is envisioned as being more employment-oriented.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at as well.
Yes. And there is a separate rezoning request for MXD with a preliminary development plan that is going to be coming to the board in the not-too-distant future, potentially at your June meeting. And it's for land that's located on the west side of the interchange.
Of the west side of Branton.
No, it's over here on the west side of the NC 540 interchange.
Oh, over on that side. Okay, gotcha.
Yes. Yes.
Is there anything pending on the other side that,
On the east side of the
Yes,
540 interchange?
yeah, mhm.
No, there is not.
okay. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
All my questions been answered.
Great.
I have a question for staff. If the destination center was in existence today, and if it was primarily office, I'm just curious if the condition of the flat roof would still apply for a transition appeal.
If there were development in the eastern portion of the destination center, I think that that would definitely have an impact on staff's analysis as far as the use transition question is concerned, and potentially the architectural transition as well.
Okay. I wanted to echo what Dan had mentioned about the applicant's seemingly flexibility or willingness to adhere to some of the conditions that were put in. I read the notes from the neighborhood meeting, and it sounded like they were willing to mitigate a lot of the issues that came up. And so I was also curious if there were any other conditions that were placed on it from the town on the roof, or any other architectural elements that they did not adhere to, or if they did not promise to adhere to.
So again, the staff accepts the conditions that the applicant volunteers. There's been some, I guess, hypothetical discussions. I'm not the only staff member that's been involved during the life of the case with the project. At this time, we did work with them to clean up the conditions to make it clear what was being stated. Other than what's prohibited, everything that's allowed in our architectural standards remains. So that's, at this point, if there are to be additional conditions, they would be volunteered by the applicant. And what those might be, it's up to the applicant to decide, if they wanted to offer something, what they would choose to offer.
Okay. Thank you.
So let me just try to take what's just been said on both sides of me and coalesce it a little bit. Being very mindful that we don't want to intimate that there are conditions that we have in mind that would turn a red X into a green check mark. That the applicant proposes, we respond, not the other way around. I'm being mindful of that. It's conceivable there exists a set of conditions that might do just that. We just don't know what they are. However, the other red X seems to be more carved in stone in this time, not so much in terms of space, but in terms of time. The destination center to the west is not developed. We don't know what will be there at this point. So the idea of a transition is really hard to get our head wrapped around because we don't know what we're transitioning from residential to. If there were things in place already, we would be better equipped to decide whether that's an adequate transition. We would be better equipped to decide if there's already too much office in that area or whatever. It's the fact that there's this giant, big brown blob of uncertainty to the west of here that creates that red X. Is that the way am I interpreting that properly?
I wouldn't call it uncertainty necessarily from the staff perspective. It's just, I think, potentially premature was the term that I used.
Yes, you did. You said premature.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's for the board to discuss and consider.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Rob, can you put the slide back up? You had it just a minute. They just showed all the conditions
Yes.
on them. It's much easier to look at than trying to read the staff report summary. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything you have, a question or a comment attached to that, or?
I'm just thinking. I don't have a comment.
I do have another question.
Sure, go right ahead.
For the applicant. Was there any cost analysis that was done on the architecture of the roof? How much it would cost in order to satisfy existing
Right, well,
regulations?
I wouldn't say a cost analysis was done. The best way I can answer that is, as Mr. McFarland pointed out, they have retained a reputable architecture firm to help them. They haven't kind of turned them loose to fully plan the building just because of the expense associated with it. There is a significant cost, and they're small business owners. They're not developers, and so it's not, they're not people who do this on a regular basis, and so they haven't run through the full kind of let's figure out what the cost of doing X versus Y is, just because it's expensive to do so, and they just don't have the funds lying around to be able to justify that as part of a zoning case where it is, everything's at risk. You might not get that money back if you end up, offering conditions consistent with those things and the case still doesn't get approved. So the short answer is no, we haven't done a cost analysis. The long answer is there's just a lot of risk associated with the zoning process.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions? Anything you want to toss around? I mean, you can put a motion on the table, we can kick it around, or we can just speak conceptually for a few moments. What do you guys want to do here? I sense there are a lot of folks that are kind of really weighing things at this point.
I am. I mean, I'm not sure if I want to put a motion yet, but I may work my way into that. I'm trying to balance a couple of things that you mentioned. One is lots of work went into meeting conditions around buffers, et cetera. I think a lot of effort in trying to really define what this building is, and this, I appreciate having the slide that's there in a spot. I mean, as I was asking some of the questions, like, okay, we know what we've defined what the rock is. And the part that you mentioned about time, because we don't know what that what that center is going to be. We know the one on the other side of 540 is coming before us. I think at one time there's talked about being a work session around that because it's so large. And I have to believe that's going to be the tipping point. When that comes, then somebody's going to come on the other side of the street as a companion. That one on speculation here. If the one that's on the west side comes to being close to what has been, we've seen or has been available in drafts, I mean, we know it's going to be significant. I expect that the other side's going to come. So it's kind of like betting on the come, It's like something's going to happen there. Is this, I think that the applicant, I'm leaning towards wishing there were more architectural. And that's where I'm leaning. I wish there was just a little bit more on the architecture. I appreciate the roof and everything, and it's just like trying to understand just what would put that check mark for the staff on the architectural side to tip it. But so that's my conundrum, and I'm not going to make a motion right yet. So.
Can I join his conundrum?
Conund away.
Conundrum, yeah. I'm sort of the same place. I think O&I can do fine next to residential, and I think they've probably done everything appropriate with buffers as far as buffering against the residential. I have trouble seeing in the future that this property would develop as R12 in the future next to a destination center. Maybe somebody would come in with an R8 or whatever, a more intensive residential use, but I can't see it being an R12 property in the future. I too would like, I wish there was more in about the architectural impact of it. But then I answer my own argument by saying, well, they've got really good buffers, and they do have some restrictions on the size of the building and that sort of thing. So I don't know. I'm still in the same quandary, but I tend to think that the proposal might be passable.
What you just said there just brings something to mind. You mentioned something earlier, Rob, about spot zoning. By that, did you mean this could go in as O&I, and then later on we could get a big bunch of residential zoning around it, and it would be an oasis in a sea of incongruous or inconsistent zoning? Is that what the...
I think the spot zoning came from one of the neighbors.
That's correct. The spot zoning was an issue, a concern that was mentioned by a neighbor at the council public hearing.
Okay.
That's where that came from.
But that was the concern, is that some sort of giant townhouse or res over retail or something would go in there, and this would be all, okay.
I'm going to make a motion.
Fire away.
I'm going to move that the board find case number 18 REZ 22 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report presentation and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Before there's a second, you said is consistent.
Is consistent.
Right.
That's what I said.
Okay. Is there a second for is
Voting in-
consistent?
I'll second so we can keep talking about it.
We like to keep talking. Who wants to go? Oh, you made the motion, so set us off here.
All right. I'm looking at it from, as was talked about by staff, in terms of a transition between the residential and what will be a large development to the west of Brampton. That's what's in our plan, and I have every belief that that will eventually happen. I think that in absence of my desire for more architectural, I think the applicant has gone over and above what we've seen many applicants in my 4 years being on this board in terms of really working on buffers and also trying to define what the space will and won't be in terms of no dumpsters, no loading docks, adding the privacy fence, I think, shielding the generators every step along the way. And I think that, and I read some of the notes that came from the meetings with the neighbors, understand about lighting, stormwater. We understand that's all going to be addressed at, those items, things like stormwater will be addressed at site plan. The town has ordinances on terms of lights and things along those lines. So some of those things will be, and I just, I think that I'll vote yes on it. It's going to go to council, and they're going to have the final say, but.
And I would agree with what he said. It's a struggle. I mean, it's close, and I would love to have some set of conditions that it's a perfect building to fit into a residential neighborhood. We don't have that. I don't even know if they could produce it if we wanted it. But I still think that, number one, I think we need to encourage O&I in Cary, just as an overall general policy, and this is O&I. And I think O&I can be compatible with a residential use if it's properly buffered, and I think they've worked on the buffer. And that's probably enough to push me in favor of voting yes on it.
Anyone else want to?
I'm going to pipe in here. There's definitely a couple of things that really jump out at me. Kind of the first one, I guess, is I find it kind of funny that as a board, we hear a lot of rezoning cases, and one of the things that we really struggle with is this idea of infill, is when you have an infill case, and it's really difficult to deal with that. And here we have the opposite, where we have a lot of uncertainty around it, and that's one of the things that's held us up. And I just think it's kind of interesting that that's kind of what the holdup is here. One other thing that jumps out at me is that we have an existing business here in Cary that's willing to relocate and remain in Cary. I think that really goes to the heart of our work chapter in the comprehensive plan, and I definitely commend the applicant for wanting to stay in Cary and pursuing the opportunity. I also think that they did an excellent job, as Dan mentioned, that they really worked with staff, worked with the neighbors on trying to fit this in there and kind of meet the demands and kind of come out with everyone being happy and kind of making for it. The one thing that is kind of really makes this difficult for me is this board is focusing on consistency. And while I think it's excellent what the applicant's doing and what they've put forth, really it comes down to, is this consistent? Is this the best use for the land? One of the things from the staff report that Mr. Wilson mentioned was the fit into the neighborhood fabric, which comes from our comprehensive plan. And that's really the one thing that kind of has me held up, that I keep coming back to. And on paper, I really don't think that this does fit today into the neighborhood fabric. Personally, I would think something like a small commercial would be better suited given the composition of the neighborhood today. Now, with the destination center adjacent to the property, I definitely understand how that developing, this could end up making a perfect transition between residential and high-intensity office. The problem being, we don't know what's going in that destination center. So in today's world, I really don't think that this is the best use of the land, and therefore I'm going to vote against this motion and find that it is not consistent.
Steve, got anything?
I do. I echo pretty much every one of those comments. I also do not support this. And I'm just going to, say just, from a total citizen's perspective, I'm not really worried about the roof and some of the other things that have kind of been talked about. It's the transition and the lack of understanding today what the transition is. This really may be great, but I don't know what I'm transitioning to right now. So I'm hung up on the architecture piece from Shape, is that if I knew a little bit more about what was going on in the destination center, as Ryan just said, maybe this would be the perfect transition, but right now, it just seems a little early for this. And again, I struggle with this because this is obviously the type of company that Cary wants, needs, and should have, but I just can't see the transition right now. So I just can't get comfortable that we're asking to decide about things that we just don't really have a lot of information right now. So I just can't get 100% behind it.
2-2 so far. Nicole, you got anything else?
Yeah. I think that the fact that the adjacent property is zoned as destination center, and by nature, the things that will go into a destination center will allow for then the transition to be appropriate for this particular building. And I agree, I'm not as hung up about the roof. I think with the buffering, then that should help mitigate. I also did notice in the meetings about the lights. I think as a citizen, I would be more concerned about lights than I would be about the roof. So I'll just state that. I know that there was it sounded as if further investigation was going to be considered in terms of the height of the lights, and so that would be my larger concern. But from a consistency standpoint, the fact that adjacent property is zoned for destination center makes me think that this is consistent.
Thank you. I trust the guys to my right and left implicitly to hold me down if I go off on too crazy of a rant. I don't, I mean, I think I've been on this board longer than anyone else here, and I've sat here through traffic discussions where we've had small parcels like this come in that have been already surrounded by development, and then they kick off a traffic study, and we keep saying over and over again, last to the party always gets stuck carrying the load for all these other large, or, you know, these other developments that have gone in ahead of time. Here we got someone first to the party, and we're saying, hold on till we see who else is coming to the party before we make a move on this. From a use standpoint, forgetting Net 32 and everything else, from a use standpoint, show me something other than a single-family detached zoning surrounding that area for which office would not be an appropriate transition. A supermarket complex goes in there, something else, this would be okay. Anything other than single-family detached, and we'd say this is an okay zoning or a use to have as a transition. I mean, if I'm wrong about that, please help me out, but I just don't see where this is the potential universe of uses that can surround this that would make this an inappropriate transition, absent other residential, I don't notice. But more importantly to me, or no, that's the most important, is the use part. Tangentially to me, and I know we're not supposed to talk about who the applicant is and all this other kind of stuff, but I just think you've mentioned this existing business in Cary's zoning here, and you know, I would not be surprised to see the list of zoning conditions amended before this goes to council, having had it kicked around so many times here. That said, you know, the applicant's probably going to be very willing to do what it needs to do to get this use approved. But if we say, hold on, wait, I mean, what, some giant development that you alluded to potentially could come in here, not employing a single person in this area, you know, just one of these big giant megapoli coming in somewhere and laying out all this giant plan, and we're going to have this so large, too big to fail kind of thing where you go, well, how would he say no to something like that? And here we have this local group that wants to expand or wants to just consolidate their operations here. I know I can't consider that, but I just thought I'd mention that, just from the optics of it. From a use standpoint, I'm on board with this. I really don't see how I can't be. And I'll shut up now. Anybody else have anything else?
I guess I don't want to necessarily respond to what you're saying,
No,
but
go right ahead.
one of the things I did want to kind of put across here is the office use is, yes, transition is important, but also thinking about the neighborhood, like what's out there today, like what is the best mechanism to serve that neighborhood? And as I mentioned before, it may be like some type of small commercial. I mean, were that destination center to develop, you know, with high intensity office, I mean, do we want this small 15,000 square foot office there, or would the area be better served with some other type of commercial entity there? For example, I know that area very well, and one of the things that we don't have a lot of there is gas stations. Now, I'm not proposing that that is the best use of the land, but would some peripheral type of commercial be better suited for that area? That, I think, is something that, in time, we would definitely have a better ability to answer that. And that's with the whole destination center kind of cropping up. And that's kind of where I'm hung up on. I mean, it's really not fair to the property owner to say, hey, let's wait. But at the same time, like, is it fair to the residents that live there now that might be underserved to kind of deny them that opportunity? So, and that's part of where I'm coming from with, is this really the best use of the land?
Fair point, completely.
But my thought on
That's why I
that
like
is,
sitting next to you.
if I were the neighbor backing up on that property, I'd rather have an office next to me than a gas station. I'm sorry.
You know, as we're still kicking this around, they've eliminated all the other things that could be but an office. It's basically as close as you can get, as good as it gets. You know, it's low traffic volume, low noise, probably not allowed on night operates, just cars coming. So I'm kind of wrestling with that, and I've sat here and looked at enough on Google Earth, et cetera, and playing, the civil engineer of like, okay, 1,500 square feet, 2 stories, if it's 2 stories, where would the footprint be? Here's the buffer. There's still a lot of buffer between the north part of that property, even where the next house is, and so you say, look, nobody's going to see a 15,000 square foot office. I mean, that's just, so there's part of it is I feel, and I appreciate everybody, and this is why I sit here and I wrestle with it, but I think it's like, unless we could like have a utopia where we could discern what's going to be there, it's going to be something that's going to be a buffer. And the reason I asked my question at the beginning, it's like, those 2 acres have sat for a long time. The developer, the original developer back in 1991 on R12 there, he had an opportunity to do something with that. Never did anything. So that's been a long time. That was zoned in with that development, and then it sat idle. Not even a green space, a park, or, another house. And they, so it's like, okay, it is where it is, and we know where we're going to be in this community with our community plan in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And we have one destination development coming before us, and as somebody mentioned, there's only 5 of them in the town. And the way we're growing, it's, so anyways, that's, and for all the reasons of, here's probably about the last piece of land, 2-acre site that a small business could afford to buy to build something on left in Cary is the other reality, so anyway, I'm done.
Does anyone have anything else?
Just one other
Sure,
comment. Staff did a really good job on this. Here I am saying that I'm going to vote for it, and they were not completely positive about it, but the staff did a really good job, and that's why I've been having such difficulty with it. They pointed out the problems, and they're problems.
I'm going to feel guilty just from the staff, but it's what we're here for.
The other point to make is for those of you out there going, just shut up and vote already, guys. It's what we're doing here. I see Mr. Barron writing feverishly. This makes a better application that goes before the town council. Believe it or not, they take what we kick around, regardless of how we vote. This is the citizen's perspective we're supposed to be providing, I've never seen a discussion like this not end up in the applicant's head and then into a better presentation or better package that goes before the council. So
Just one more comment. You read my mind, because that's really why I'm taking the position that I am, to be very honest with you. Again, citizens' perspective. I realize that regardless of how we vote today, we're giving ideas to our representatives for them to make a final decision. And I just think it's very important to have this potentially minority view that says there's some concerns here, that, and I will end up supporting whatever they do, but I think we should have this side as well go to them so they can decide what is right. And so that's really probably my reason also more than anything else is to have us spin this a little bit different, give them something else to think about when they have to make the real decision here.
absolutely, robust discussion. For sure. Does anyone else have anything? Then why don't we just make a vote here and allow everyone to start working on their packages to take to the council. Would all those in favor then of, I forgot the number already, it is 18 REZ 22. Would all those in favor of 18 REZ 22 being found consistent with the Cary Community Plan, please say aye.
Aye.
And I guess we'll put hands up too while we're at it. Aye. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I have 4. I'm sorry, Ms. Jenner. All those opposed say no.
No.
So that motion passes 4-2. Thank you very much for that discussion. I really appreciate that. That, I think, will be very helpful as we move forward. And again, thanks to the staff. You guys did a bang-up job on this. So unless there's any new or old business,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
it's been the Dan and Chuck show for all.
We're not going to debate this, are we?
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you and good evening.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.